Good evening. Thank you for all coming tonight. I'm going to introduce Martin Carney from the Human Relations Commission, who's going to speak to you for 45 minutes. He said he set his timer. So when that goes off, you'll be done. There's a couple handouts that he passed that you had in the front with a pre-test and a post-test, and I'll have him explain to you what he needs to have done with that. So thank you all for your attendance tonight, and here's Martin.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you all coming out tonight. I know for some of the coaches, I'm the person holding you back from your job outside the district and going home for supper. And for some of the football coaches, I am between your early practice and your film session. So I'm going to be as quick as I can. I want to thank you all for what you do for the district, what you do for the kids. I hear lots of stories about Exeter Township, what a big school district you are, and what great athletics department you have here. So it's a testament to what you do for all your students and your leadership. So I want to thank you. Now let me just tell you a little bit about what our agency does. My agency, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, is the civil rights agency for the state of Pennsylvania. We enforce two laws, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act and the Pennsylvania Fair Educational Opportunities Act. The latter law deals only with higher education. The first law deals with education in elementary through secondary schools. So that's the law that applies to you and to what we do as educators. For a little bit of housekeeping, before we get into this, Tom had mentioned there is a pre-test. So I would like all of you to complete that if you haven't already. Just take a few minutes to do it. I'm going to make the post-test easy for you though. If you listen closely to my presentation, you're going to get the answers. And here's another good part about this test. There's no grade you get. I'm the one who's going to be graded. We're using these tests to make sure that we're assessing what folks' knowledge is about the subject area we're going to be covering, and to see how good we did. So if anybody's going to be getting an F on this, it might well be me if I don't do a good job. I hope that I do get good feedback and let you know a little bit about what we do. Now, before I begin, how many of you who are coaches here are also educators with the school district? Okay, so I see a few hands. So some of you are educators in this district. You've had anti-bullying training, right? Fantastic, because that's required. Anybody else an instructor in another district? Okay, so we see a few folks, and you probably had anti-bullying training in that district that you teach in. And the rest of you, I'm assuming you're coaches, but you are not teachers in any district. Is that correct? Or in any school? Okay, okay. Well, that's good for me to know, because this is an interesting thing. My agency deals with discrimination complaints, and we deal with all sorts of those. I'm going to be talking a little bit about bullying tonight because our commission is doing an initiative on educational equity and making sure that students work in a good, safe climate. And we try to do an anti-bullying overview, and we're starting to see that some people may have some knowledge about this and some people don't. So we're going to try to give you as much of an overview as we can to let you know what the highlights are, what the law requires, and how our agency works with this. Now, my agency, we've been around since 1955, and we cover various protections. Do all of you have this sheet in front of you? Blue flyer? All right. And some of you, if you've had a chance to read it, tell me what we protect against for discrimination. Race. Okay. That's the very first one that's been in our law since the very beginning. Anyone else want to give any that you've seen? anything beyond race that we protect against? Yes, sir. You have read this, I could tell. Very good. Now, interesting thing. There is one thing in education in that list that we don't protect against. Anyone want to give a guess? Very good, by the way. I've had a gold star. I'll give you the gold star. It's age. Strangely enough, you know, we have a lot of older students who are going back to college, and some people think they get discriminated against because of that. And while that might be true, there is a unique reason why we don't have age protected against in civil rights law. Think of it this way. A person who's age 40, if we had age protected in civil rights law, and that's a cutoff for an age discrimination complaint, age 40, could probably try to see if they could get back in elementary school, which, you know, we really can't do. So age is not protected against in the law. But all those other protections that you mentioned, sir, are protected against. And I'm going to give another question. What do you think of the types of complaints we get for civil rights complaints for education? What do you think is the biggest protected class we get? Of that list that is in the flyer. Could it be race? Could it... You say disability. Okay. Good guess. Anybody else? Gender? Okay, that's another good guess. Race, I hear someone say that. Historically, that has been. Anybody else? I wish I had gold stars to give you, but I work for the state, we're broke. And like many school districts are right now nowadays, you would get it though, man. Disability is the biggest protected class right now for education complaints. 36% any complaint we get is an education complaint, which is interesting because Pennsylvania is becoming diverse in so many respects. And we're seeing that on the basis of ancestry and race especially. In the last decade, Pennsylvania, our population grew less than 4%. We're one of the lowest growth states in the United States in terms of growth overall. Not growing very fast. The white non-Hispanic population has dropped in the last decade about 1.4%. The non-white population, that means anyone who's African American, Hispanic, Asian, multiracial, has increased 33%, and for some groups much more. The Hispanic population, for instance, much more. African American students in certain districts in some parts of the state, which had been mostly white for a long time, are now more diverse. If you've seen the pictures of the graduating classes coming in, you've probably seen the change in this district itself. And it's not just on race that we become more diverse, but there's more students of different backgrounds, classes, gender involved in different sports, students with disabilities who had once been pretty much shunned and segregated into special classes now being mainstreamed, and then trying to get mainstreamed into sports and other activities. Diversity can be a great thing, and we know this, and we know it's positive. But we also know it could be a challenge, and that at times there could be divisions that could happen in schools because of it. Sometimes amongst students and between students, but sometimes due to the inattention of us who might be school professionals and educators. So with all that in mind, when we get education complaints at the commission, usually it's in one of those districts that has become newly diverse and has, just like many places, communities we live in, neighborhoods, workplaces, when change comes, it could be made a positive or a negative. And unfortunately in our history, division has been caused because of the fear of the unknown. Isn't that right? We don't know those that we work with, live with, go to school with. We all carry stereotypes and biases, and we carry those through into whatever we do. And it leads to division in the schools. So when we get a complaint of discrimination, we have to investigate it thoroughly. We have to look at all the facts and see what happened and try to recommend some solutions when we do get something. We get this with schools and we get it on these various issues. We may get a complaint alleging a student might be disciplined in an unfair way. And we see that quite a bit. We just had a complaint against a school district that, I can't name the party in the district, of course, but it was a student who got caught with a Swiss Army knife on his possession. And the school, what does that get you? You're caught with a weapon in school. You're in real trouble. Could be expelled. And in that district he was. But they found at least 2 white students who had similar, very serious incidents of dangerous possession of weapons or paraphernalia on them. They got suspended. They didn't get expelled. They didn't get an expulsion on their record. That happens. It happens in Pennsylvania. It happens nationwide. It's sad but true. So we see cases of disparate discipline. We see students who don't achieve at the same levels, and we see some real divisions in some school districts because of that. Certain groups of students are achieving, while others are not. So we get cases like that. We get cases where students aren't assigned special education classes the way they should be, or special language classes for students who need English classes for learning. So those are things that are denying students an equal and full education. That's what we're supposed to promote at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and that's what every school's supposed to promote, is equal opportunity for every student. That's important. But there's one other thing that we get complaints on, and it's a big issue, and it's happened statewide, nationwide, and it's probably the biggest type of complaint we get right now in the types of category of offense that we get. And that's called bullying. That's what I want to talk to you a little bit about tonight. Before I get into some of the meat of it, I'm just going to throw out a couple school districts you may have seen in the news. Central Bucks. You may want to tell me about that. That's been in the news a little bit. Football hazing. Can you tell everyone the details? Wow. Yep, pretty ugly stuff. And Central Bucks is one of the hallmark football programs in Pennsylvania, right? One of the story programs, and their season has now been canceled, right? That's one. Has anyone heard about the incident that happened in New Jersey? Sawyersville, is that the name of the town? Sayreville, that's right, I'm sorry. I'm from Northeast Pennsylvania, and there's a town called Sawyersville. I'm mixed up with Sayersville. You mentioned Sayersville, thank you. What happened in that district, if you care to tell? Yes. And pretty gross stuff. Thank you for mentioning that. One thing I did want to mention, sex discrimination is protected under our law. That means against either sex, and the sex of the perpetrator or the victim doesn't matter. So anything like that could well be deemed as sexual harassment or sexual bullying under the law. So it's really ugly stuff. And that district also canceled their season, right? Yeah, it's really bad stuff. I'm going to name another district to you, and I don't know if it made the news this way, but it was a district outside of Pittsburgh. And I believe it was a soccer team in the Pittsburgh area. And it was a student who had autism who was on the team. And for those of you who know, autism is it's a disorder, it's a disability that many young people are being diagnosed with nowadays. It's, I think, about 1 in 110 or so persons get diagnosed with it. And it impacts a student's ability to socialize, among other things. And some of these fellow students on the team did not feel as if this student was pulling his weight. And they decided to do something about it. Not dissimilar to what those incidents in Cyberbullying and Central Bucks happened. They unfortunately took this young man who has autism and duct taped him to a goalpost on the field after practice. He was left there for an hour, and it was only by someone hearing his crying and wailing that they found him. He could have, it was a cold night, he could have really possibly gotten hypothermia from being outside. They got him off. They found out the students who did it. And those students are in some real trouble, of course, including criminal charges. Guess who else knew about this? It's the coach. Who I believe by this point has lost his job and facing charges of his own because of his knowledge of it. You as coaches have real responsibility. I talked about diversity a little bit ago. Sports, in my mind, is such a great thing for so many things because it's also a great equalizer. People who could be assumed to not have great talent in some areas can be found to have great talents in the sports that you coach, and can get great opportunities for advancement, higher education if they want, or other fields if they want. People and students learn great lessons: teamwork, camaraderie, joining together for a cause. It brings students together from so many different backgrounds towards a common goal. Isn't that what we want? And you help foster that. That is so important. Which is why incidents like what happened in those 3 districts are just so, it is such an offense to what all of you do and where you stand for. So tonight, I'm going to give you just an overview a little bit about what bullying is and what it isn't, and some tips for prevention. And hopefully we'll answer any questions you also have. Now, bullying has a certain definition. I'm going to give the definition to you. And by the way, there is a PowerPoint. I have to apologize. My laptop was on the fritz and it wasn't working. They couldn't locate one quick enough. Tom is going to get an emailed copy of this. You're going to have my presentation tomorrow. You will all have this. And all the information you're going to have in there is in that I'm giving you tonight is going to be in there, all citations, so you're going to have it all there. But there's a certain definition of bullying, and it comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is defined as unwanted, aggressive behavior among school-aged children that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. Both kids who are bullied and those who bully others may have serious and lasting problems. So bullying is different than an incident of rough play or a fight between peers. Every so often when you have a practice, you ever have a fight between some of your players? Maybe, sometimes. Not that's a good thing. You don't want to have, divisions on your team. But if you're having a fight between 2 students of equal stature, yes, that's a serious incident, but that's not bullying. Bullying is when someone who is perceived or is more vulnerable than others are being abused. Just like that student who was duct taped to the pole. The students hazed at Central Bucks in Sayerville. Those sorts of things. It could be the student who may be one of the few students of color on an all-white team. It could be the student who speaks a little English. It could be the student who's deemed to be effeminate if he's male, or too masculine if she's female. It could be the student with a disability. It could be any one of our protected classes. It could be none of those protected classes, and it could not necessarily be a violation of our law, but it could still be bullying, and that'd be against your district's policy. Did all of you sign up on the anti-bullying policy for the school district when it was given to you? Or if you ever got a chance to see it? Maybe you didn't get a chance to see it. I hope you get a chance to take a look at it. Because every district has to have an anti-bullying policy by state law, and it's good for you to know how it's defined in it and what steps school districts have to take. And given that you are part of the school district, even as a coach, you're going to need to know what it's all about and what you need to do as a part of it. Now, there's 4 types of bullying. By the way, that's one of your quiz questions, so you already know that question is false. It says 3 types of bullying. It's actually 4. And I'll tell you the types. There's verbal, and that involves name calling. Could involve slurs, sexual comments, ethnic comments of a derogatory nature, verbal bullying. That's something we know about all too well. Physical. The incidents we just talked about in those school districts, that's as physical and as egregious as you can get. There's also social bullying. Anyone know what social bullying might be? Facebook. Okay, that's a good one, and that's when someone's being shunned, ignored. That's the most silent type of bullying, but it's also most insidious. And you've seen those things on Facebook. Cyberbullying is a 4th type, and that involves Facebook as well. Just to give you an example. I joined the 2010s in August. I finally got one of these things. I tried to avoid it for many years. I literally had a cell phone that had a rotary dial on it. That's how behind the times I was. But I finally got it. And I've got 2 daughters, 7 and 3 years old. And you know what? When we take pictures of our phone, you know what they're doing with the phones as soon as they get it? Scrolling through the pictures. They figured that out already. They literally know how to download apps right now. It is amazing. Kids are wired with this new technology like anything. Teens especially so. But, as we also know, it could also be very, very destructive. I'm going to tell you something about a case I had one time. And it involved a student who was African American in a school that had been mostly white and was starting to get more diverse, but there was some tension happening in the school district, including use of the N-word. The white student was texting this African American student and texted him and called him, "You got that racial slur." It was on a Sunday night before school. And the African American student didn't like it, told him such. The white student said, "We'll take care of it in school tomorrow." African-American student said, game on. So Monday morning comes. African-American student gets to school, gets off the bus. Sees the white student in the lobby of the school. What do you think he does? Went right over and punched him in the face. What do you think the white student did? Fell down. And what didn't he do? Fight back. And guess who got in trouble? I did not tell you this presentation. You just guessed it. And guess who got in trouble? I think you got it. The African-American student got suspended for a week. The parent didn't excuse what her son did and said, my son shouldn't have done this. But told the school, you have to know he got this text. It was racist. The school had a copy of it. They printed it out and got it. What do you think the school did? Absolutely nothing. Why do you think they didn't do anything? Well, you're giving me too much credit. They claimed it was off school hours, so they couldn't do anything about it. I'm going to tell you something, and it's interesting. Sometimes schools get nervous. They're afraid of being sued like anybody else. And they thought if they disciplined this student for what they deemed to be off-school activity, they could have been nailed. I don't think they were right, though. Because once that student, the white student, said, we'll take care of it in school on Monday morning, I think they had an opening there to do something about it, and should have. Sometimes it takes courage to do, and a little bit of research to do the right thing. But it probably would have been worth it there. So that was a real case we had, and it involved the new technology. And we're seeing it more and more. And you know, we mentioned about Facebook. A lot of students nowadays aren't even using Facebook that much. They're using other sites, other social mediums to do their thing, text, send messages, pictures, sexting, and they're really kind of jumping ahead in many ways of us adults and trying to keep on top of it. Now, I'm just going to ask you a few questions. True or false? And again, giving you some of your answers on your post-test. Students who are bullied usually participate in class and have good attendance. What do you think? True? Anybody for false? Okay, mixed bag. Believe it or not, it's false. We do research on this at the commission quite a bit, and believe me, when we cover this stuff, we sometimes get surprised. Students who are targeted by bullies sometimes avoid school or have trouble concentrating. They can develop disorders like depression and anxiety quite easily because of it. Nearly 160,000 students skip school every day to avoid being bullied. Can you believe that? So that one's false. Next question. Most students who bully are insecure. Okay, see here are some for true. Anybody for false? This one surprised me too. Believe it or not, it's false. Studies show that most bullies have confidence and high self-esteem. Surprised me. It's a warped self-esteem, but self-esteem nevertheless. Bullies do poorly in school compared to students who do not bully. True or false? Okay, I hear a true. Anybody for false? Anyone for I don't know, because you might be a little bit confused right now. It's actually true. Behaviors associated with bullying include impulsiveness, disliking school, and getting into trouble often. Certainly, you're not going to want to go to school if you're getting in trouble all the time. It wouldn't be my preferred place to go. Last question. Most bullies discontinue aggressive behavior in adulthood. True or false? False. Anything for true? Isn't it just a rite of passage? Kids grow out of it? Actually false. Good answer. 60% of bullies will go on to have at least one adult criminal conviction because their behavior carries over. So they're learning the wrong lessons in life, and they don't learn the right things until it's way too late. Now, I just want to give a few stats out, just two more, just so you know this. Every school has to have an anti-bullying program in Pennsylvania. That's state law. And this district has one. And what I'm doing for you in 45 minutes is not the same as a certified anti-bullying training that would take sometimes 6 or 8 sessions. I'm trying to give you the tip of the iceberg, but I'm trying to give you some best practices just so you know how to address it. Because we've mentioned, some teams have had some egregious incidents that have been ignored, or in some cases actually condoned. And it's wrecked the season. We don't want to see that happen, including all the activities you were involved in. But here's some stats I just want to throw out at you. Studies of bullying have been done by many organizations, including the federal government. And they surveyed teachers. And they asked the teachers that when you know about an incident of bullying, you feel like you always address it the right way. And 70% said yes. When we see it, we address it. Now, there's a couple things that's missing from that, though. If they see it, yeah, they're going to try to address it. But number one, sometimes what's happening is that bullying's happening when they're not around. It's done in secret. Like the social media type of things that they may not see. Or the social shunning that they may be oblivious to. So they may not know about it. And number two, they may not address it right. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have two students bullying a vulnerable, smaller student, calling him names, doing some physical assault on him. Teacher sees it and decides, let's sit all the students down and talk about it. Clear the air. Doesn't that sound like a good thing? Kumbaya, let's get everyone together and reason together. I heard a chuckle. Why do you think that's not a good thing? That's right, that's right, that's right. But believe it or not, some schools have done that. Well-meaning, wrong. Think about this, a victim of domestic abuse having to face his or her abuser, it's similar. A student who's being victimized, being made to face his or her abusers. The students who bully normally in the same light that will say, oh, it'll never happen again, and when they leave, it's worse, right? So that's why 66% of bullying victims believe school professionals respond poorly when incidents happen. And that's why it's so important to know that when something does happen, we've got to be on top of it. There's got to be some good things that schools do to try to address it, like creative ways. For those of you who are educators, you may know about the Southern Poverty Law Center and Teaching Tolerance. They've got great materials. And we ask schools to do those types of things, to get creative ways for students to get to talk to each other, to work together, to break down the barriers that they have. Your various sports activities are great ways to break down barriers, to making sure students are treated equally and respectfully. But there also has to be a strong response when things do happen. You change the culture of a school, change the culture of a team, change the culture of a classroom, It's got to be both creative ways, but also strong enforcement of your school's rules. So, when we have an incident of bullying, the main thing is that whenever you see an incident, it's got to be reported to school officials right away. And as coaches, you are school officials who will be able to see these things. You need to notify your superior, whether it be Mr. Legath, who I think would be your point of contact, or any other school administrator who will be in a position to address this. You may need to investigate any type of incident that has happened. That will need to involve you talking to the victim separately, not in front of the victimizers, and possibly any other witnesses that that the victim may identify, or anybody else you think you need to talk to. If it's on your team, you know your athletes, you know who the team leaders are, and you know what team member knows the pulse of the team. You need to make sure that everybody is in a safe spot and in a safe place. You also need to talk to the people who did the incident. Get them to be honest. Just like any investigation that is done, you need to get all the facts and try to keep our opinions out. And we don't make victims and victimizers apologize on the spot. Sometimes there's some real incidents that have some real repercussions. Sometimes a student who gets involved in bullying may be disciplined, and in some cases may be suspended for some time. We don't like to see that happen to anybody, but sometimes consequences mean that's going to happen. And in some situations, there may be a need to call the police. Does anyone know about the hate crime law in Pennsylvania? It's a real law. It's not one our agency enforces, but it's enforced by local law enforcement and state police. It protects people against hate incident based on race, color, national origin, or religion. And there's a number of hate crimes that happen in Pennsylvania that don't get reported. If disability was protected under the law in Pennsylvania, that student who had the disability who was duct taped to the soccer post, that could have been assault, and it could have been based on disability, and that could have been a hate crime if that was protected under it. So there are things, there could be criminal incidents. Sexual abuse, for instance. Those awful things that happened in New Jersey. Should have called the police immediately when something like that happens. So this isn't fun and games, and things need to happen. That happens. So with all that in mind, when you do get an incident to your attention, don't ever sit on it. Report it, investigate it, let the facts dictate the course you will take. Because believe me, in the end, our law will be upheld, the school's reputation will be upheld, and in the end, the right thing will have been done. And believe me, your students who are on your teams will thank you for this in the end, because there's important life lessons, and sometimes life lessons that are more important than the win or loss record. It's making sure that the right thing has been done, and that fairness is upheld, and that the reputation of this great institution, or any great institution, any of our 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, is doing what we need to do, making sure that every child who is in these walls gets the best education they can, gets to participate in the great extracurricular activities you have, gets formed into solid citizens who someday will be taking care of us hopefully we'll do a good job. They'll take care of us just as well as we're trying to raise them. Now with that in mind, I've done a lot of talking. You've been a great audience. You've been very participative. Does anyone have any questions for me? Anything I did not make clear? I did not raise that. I'm glad. They are more likely. Students who bully, they're more likely to bring a weapon to school. They are more likely to have a criminal offense in their lifetime. They are definitely more likely to drop out. And students who are bullied, they also face some unique challenges. Low self-esteem, increased depression, anxiety. Both bullies and those who are bullied have poor school performance, though for other reasons. In extreme circumstances, students who are bullied consider suicide, and there have been some notable incidents that happen, and that's very, very sad, and that rocks schools when it happens. So, you know, when we allow students to be bullied, it hurts them. But for those who bully and we don't do anything about it, we're not teaching them any favors either. And they're getting all the wrong lessons too. So I'm glad you brought that up. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. You see something happening that needs your immediate attention. Like an incident in the locker room. Yeah, sure.
What if I see, I'm fast, how does somebody outside team? I didn't even know I had a team.
Sure.
With other kids, they are on their team, do not know.
My guess is like, I would just, you know, just like you would observe anything. Take a note of what you see. Let your athletic director know right away. You know, you might know the coach and you may want to say something, but as the athletic director, you would need to know about this, because then you're going to want to look into this. Whenever there's an incident, think of it this way. If I'm in my workplace and I'm seeing another incident involving another work unit, I'm going to want to tell somebody in authority if I see a problem. That minute. Okay. If you're seeing something, I would definitely try to do anything I could to stop it. And certainly if you have to go to one of the coaches on the football team and say, hey, you know, there's something going on here, let's try to address it. Do it. Do it. Good question. Then certainly after you've addressed it, let Tom know. He's going to need to know it. And that's where really good anti-bullying training comes in. I'm giving the tip of the iceberg. Certified anti-bullying training, for those who've gone through it, goes into the details about the response. And the key thing is, and this is a really good thing about really good anti-bullying programs, student bystanders are sometimes in the best position to stop it. Because there have been times, we've seen in some school districts, where you get students who are privy to things happening, and they on their own will go to school leaders, the principal or teacher, and they say, hey, we saw this happening in the locker room, or we saw this happening in the hallway. We want you to know about it. We want our spring protector. A lot of times students are good bystanders and they don't want to get involved or stick their necks out and get in any trouble. But schools that have really good cultures of inclusiveness and equity that the students buy into, they'll see things on their own and they'll respond. That's the key in the end, really. And if you've got a school system that has that, boy, is that going to help you out. You'll have eyes and ears that'll be able to tell you things that are happening. If you don't have that, it's got to be built. And in the meantime, we've got to be vigilant as leaders and coaches and school professionals. Good question. Thank you. Well, I got this done in 45 minutes flat, and I want to thank you. And hope I can hold you back from dinner or your film session. Thank you for what you do.